Thank you, ma'am. Good morning. Let's call the meeting to order, please. Today is Tuesday. It's January 23rd. We're at the Civic Center here for our bi-monthly meeting. Let's please stand for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Clerk, call the roll, please.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Here.
Ms. Albrecht.
Here.
Mayor Kathy.
Here.
Mr. Wallace.
Here.
Mr. Putnam.
Here. Thank you. I don't have anything at this time. Mr. McLaughlin?
No.
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 No. We're quiet this morning, aren't we? All right. Citizens' comments. Recognize enough faces. Y'all know the rules. Have any comments? Wow. Okay. Under the consent agenda, we have the meeting from January 9th. Chair will entertain a motion to accept.
I have one correction.
Yeah. You have a correction?
Yep. The time is 8:07, not 7:55. As written on for adjournment. I saved and printed it before I corrected it.
You're on top of your game, aren't you? Good job. All right. With one correction on the adjourning time. Motion to
Make a-
accept.
Second.
Have a motion second. Any opposition to the consent agenda? Motion carries 5-0 with that one correction. Okay. Mr. Jeff, you're up.
Good morning, Jeff Britton, Dewberry Preble Rish. Only project I wanted to talk about today is the beach renourishment restoration project. We talked about the proposal for design and permitting services last meeting. I think everybody had a copy of that they could take and review. One of the questions that I got over the course of a couple of weeks is, what are the limits of work? And if you'll remember the feasibility study from last spring, it's from the range monuments 132 to 137.8. And on the back page of the handout that I gave everybody is an aerial exhibit that shows how far that spans of the beach. It goes from just west of Parker Park all the way to down around Toucans. And so another thing that kind of came up over the course of the last 2 weeks is maybe a little confusion between agreements. The agreement with DEP for the grant funding has been executed, and the city has a copy of that. The scope and fee that you're looking at in front of you, the proposal, that agreement is between the city and Dewberry Preble Rish, and that includes all the effort to survey, do the environmental studies, design, and permit the improvements that were identified in that feasibility study that the city was interested in. And the two options at the time that they were interested in looking at further was the beach restoration, which is the truck hauling of sand, dredging it from down by the canal, placing it between range monument 132 and 137, and using trucks to haul it down there. The other option that was discussed was construction or improvements to the existing East Jetty system. And those improvements would range from just making the current length of jetties sand tight, so that sand that's placed on the beach can't filter back through there and back into the canal where it was just dredged from, to actually extending it in an effort to keep sand that's drifting down the beach get caught up in the little eddy and settling right there. And the jetties are meant to help improve the improvements to the east jetties are meant to help improve the dredging process that Philip and his guys undertake on a routine basis. So what you have in front of you is our proposed scope and fee, and I think something we touched on last time was The design work was only around $32,000, and just about everything else is for regulatory compliance. So the proposal itself outlines, specifically outlines the steps it will take, the permits that we'll pursue, and what will be designed. The only question remaining is, do we want to do design and permitting of the truck haul of the sand for the beach restoration, or do we want to also include the design and permitting of the East Jetty system? Now, if we do the design and permitting of the East Jetty system, any improvements there, whether that's just making the current one sand tight or extending them, making them a larger system, those don't have to be constructed at this time. The permit that's associated with those is a 10-year permit. So that can be designed and permitted and kind of shelved. So the next time that there was grant funding available, it could be applied. We could apply for it to use for that if that's something the city wanted. So that's kind of the limits of everything I wanted to talk about today. What we need from the council, and I think we talked about this a little bit last time, was a decision: are we going to pursue the design and permitting of both the sand hauling and the East Jetty improvements, or do we want to pull the East Jetty improvement design and permitting out for now, but authorize Mel to go ahead and sign off on this so we can begin the design work, the field work necessary so we can actually get to the point where we can begin hauling the sand. The goal would be, or the hope would be, to begin with the truck hauling of the sand in November, because the work has to be done outside of turtle season. But we're already to the end of January. By the time we started on design documents and permitting packages, you're probably at the end of February. That might be a pretty tight timeline to be able to begin work in November. But we should be able to begin work in January or February of next year. But again, if that's not going to provide enough time to make the cost of hauling the sand down there worthwhile, then we just shelve it to begin November of 2019. Does anyone have any questions or need some clarification?
How crucial is that east, as far as an engineering opinion, that we get started on that soon?
Our coastal engineer thinks that it's a very worthwhile investment. There's some that spoke up after his feasibility study was presented last spring that said that they really didn't feel that was a good use of funds, but he believes in it. It's one of the things that he ranked pretty highly in his feasibility study that would help improve the dredging process and the efficiency of the program. And again, that's something that can be designed and permitted and just shelved for now until the city decided they wanted to do it.
So help me to understand, if we get all our permits back by March, what is involved that it would take 6 months, that it might take more than 6 months to start in November?
Well, let me take a step back. We would be hoping to have the application submitted by then. There's certain studies, there's survey field work that needs to be done. And right now our survey crews are 3 to 4 weeks out before they can begin work. So if we got notice to proceed today, 3 to 4 weeks from now we'd begin the survey work. We'd also have to do an environmental assessment on the habitat around the beach, and then get our applications into the review agencies. Just the time it takes for all their internal reviews and back and forth and conversations, meetings, providing additional information if they have questions. It's just a timely process.
I misunderstood you. I thought.
Sorry about that.
I thought we'd have it be ready to go by March, but things have to get into place before. No, so I'm my misunderstanding.
Sure.
That's fine.
So do we get funding from the government on that?
Yeah, there's a grant that the state of Florida has provided for $465,000, and the city matches the last 25% of it. So I think it's around $160,000 that the city
Yeah,
matches.
I'm asking you about on the other side of the canal. adding sand out there
On the west side?
on the east side.
Yeah, that's covered under our grant with DEP.
Oh, okay.
The grant itself is for the design, permitting, and construction of the improvements.
So Jeff, if we delay the east side, does that reduce the scope of work?
Yeah, if we decide not to pursue the design and permitting, we would get Mel a revised scope, and it would include our reduced fee because you wouldn't have the design and permitting efforts associated with that portion of the project.
Back in, this is dated April of last year. When this came before, is the city's position that this money was set aside as part of the grant? It's included in the total. When we applied, we knew what this number was when we started before.
I think there was an idea. That scope and fee wasn't finalized till around April of last year.
Well, what I'm trying to figure out is, are we better to stay with the scope and go ahead and get the permitting? The permit's good for 10 years, right?
Correct. Correct.
If we don't, and we decide to do it in 3 or 4 years, who knows what the cost would be then?
Well, there's also a point that right now the city's getting the whole project for 25% of the total cost. And there's no guarantee what the grant funding situation is going to be moving forward. If we were to try and go back and do it again, the city might be paying 50% of the cost if it was something they decided they wanted to do. Does that make sense?
But we get the permit, but we know going in, if we choose, that we wouldn't proceed with doing the work. That would give us more money for moving sand down the beach.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'm with you.
Was somebody going to help us with that 25%?
Yes,
That's what I thought. They were going to give, what, 22%?
we're gonna have your 25%.
Oh, I was just asking.
So your request today is for us to give some guidance to the administrator so that we can finalize the scope of work.
Correct. And get moving on the surveys and studies that need to be done.
Okay. All right, do we have, is there any more questions, first of all? All right, so what we have before us then is $160,525 for a comprehensive scope of work that involves moving the sand to those points that are identified, plus the East Jetty permitting. We have our choice of accepting it, modifying it, taking something out. We don't know what the reduced cost would be in terms of if we took the East Jetty out, but again, it's for the permitting. It's not for the construction, so I mean, whether or not we build it or not, once we get the permit, we know we have it, we can apply again down the road for some more funds.
Correct.
I think it's always been the desire to get as much sand to the critically eroded areas as possible.
Right.
Chair Leonard, are there any comments from the floor concerning this project? Been hanging around for a while, and we're grateful to have a chance to get something done. So, Chair will entertain a motion.
So moved. Or what?
We gotta have more than that.
Well, everybody's been paying attention. The clerks can read that back to me. What did I say, clerk?
So moved. I can do that.
I believe you're making a motion to approve the scope of work in the
Right.
amount of $160,525.
Yeah, my wife's not here today, and she warned me not to amble and gamble around. That's my point.
Okay.
Second.
I'm sure everyone understands that, so I don't know. We have a second, so we're moving forward with the full scope of work, which will include the East Jetty permit.
That's what I meant, yes.
We have a motion second. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Ms. Albright?
Yes.
Mayor Kathy?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Mr. Putnam?
Yes.
Thank you for clarifying that your wife is here. That's
So
important.
if I go on and on, you can punch me or something.
No, that's Rex's job. All right, we are moving on. Jeff, thank you. Appreciate it. I do have a question for the clerk or for the administrator. The funds, our 25%, that's a budgeted number? Our 12.5%?
It's not budgeted, but it's there, awaiting a budget amendment for when the time came. We did set it aside from the pier, or from the canal fund during that project. It's been encumbered.
Okay, it's been encumbered. Okay. And the CDC?
We've got ours budgeted.
Thank you. Okay. All right, let's see. Next is the first reading of ordinance 691. Do I have a motion to read by title only?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Please read.
Ordinance 691, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Mexico Beach amending the land development regulations to modify the non-conforming use rule for food trailers, repealing ordinances in conflict to the extent of that conflict, providing for severability, providing for codification, and providing an effective date.
Okay. That is the first reading. That will go on our February meeting, which would be the second meeting, the 9 o'clock meeting.
Yeah.
To allow the 30-day, which is our normal way of doing it. I don't think, do we need to, is any, or do we want to do that? We have the option to move it to our first meeting. Council have a choice. Or just stick with our regular 30-day cycle.
Yes, please. That's been standard.
February 27th.
Yeah, second reading. All right, we have two resolutions. The first is Resolution 2018-02. Do I have a motion to read by title only?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any opposition? Please read.
Resolution 2018-02 is a resolution of the City Council of the City of Mexico Beach, Florida, to support construction of sidewalks on 15th Street with transportation alternatives funding and providing an effective date.
Okay, this is, just for those of you that might not be familiar, this is for the sidewalk. Is this through the TPO?
No. We're trying to get TPO, but they haven't been very responsive.
TPO.
Yeah, that's what I said.
I know, I did too. You're pointing to the CDC.
Well,
Okay, I'm just.
I was actually pointing to Jeff.
Oh, my bad.
Yeah, I know.
This
not
is
to
through
po-
DOT?
I know not to point to CDC.
DOT. We might have to think about these 9 o'clock
No
meetings.
TPO.
Okay. Do I have a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Second.
Any opposition? Motion carries 5-0. Next is Resolution 2018-03. Do I have a motion to read by title only?
Pause for 1 second. I want to table that. The state rejected it and wants it written differently, so we're going to do it in 2 weeks.
Okay, we're pulling that off.
Yep.
Okay? That'll be tabled until the first meeting in February.
Yeah, I just have to rewrite it. They've already sent me the draft.
Okay. All right, so scratch that one. All right, moving on to other business. Mr. Wallace?
Discussion on LDR regarding accessory structures. Like we talked about and ran it around the tree a few times last meeting. I've never liked the LDR that deals with this in the first place. It dates back for several years for me personally. And I feel like, for the people here, they not know what we're talking about. It's, I think it was, should I mention who the? No? Okay. Someone had two different buildings in their backyard, and they fixed them, did a nice job of preparing them for for people to rent. They're not apartments, but they're rooms to rent. And the LDR kind of dances around that in some respects. But basically, I think the intent over the years has been you couldn't do that. You couldn't have a separate room, or you couldn't have anything that what was it, when they told me I couldn't do that 10 or 12 years ago, it was I couldn't have a mother-in-law's apartment. Well, believe me, I wouldn't want my mother-in-law there in the first place. But that was the gist of what was going on, regardless of what family member was staying there, or if you wanted to rent it. And I think everybody up here understands what we're talking about. Do I need to ramble along here?
No, but I'll add into it. I took a walk yesterday, which I do a fair amount. Basically ranged from 8th Street going east, almost to the end of the city. But in the area I walked in, I actually saw, in some form or another, probably 10 places that had units that were not attached to the homes. A couple of them were probably, because of the age of the area and everything, it was probably grandfathered in before the LDR. They actually, 2 of them actually had really fairly large units sitting out in the backyard. I saw probably 4 or 5 that potentially, just from the distance, I didn't walk into yards or anything, appeared that the same type situation. A couple of them were trailers, but the ones I saw that were RVs or trailers, most of them had not been moved in probably 10 years, so I kind of consider them as an accessory building. One of them even had a electric pole sitting right in front of it, so you couldn't hook it up. I guess my feeling in looking at it is I understand what the LDR is saying, but we really apparently haven't emphasized it to a large extent over the past years. If in that small area I could see that many. I'm not sure if it's time to totally rewrite it or just bring that section up to date. Personally, I have no problem with a mother-in-law's suite that's not attached to the home. My mother-in-law has passed now, and we had talked about this type situation. And I know working with someone of that age, being independent is extremely important. And in talking with her, attached to the home was kind of like being in the house, even though it was a mother-in-law suite. Being a detached facility, even though it was on the property and easily walked, gave her independence. She never agreed, so I never went further than that, but I do know that she felt the independence of being not attached was more favorable for her. I don't think we've actually enforced this over the past years, at least from the area I've seen, so I think we may need to just bring it up to date to what's realistic.
Well, my point of view is if it's in the LDR, it needs to be enforced. Or if the people don't like it, we need to take it off the books totally. And I just feel like, I'm just thinking, next door to me is a real nice home, but the people are good neighbors, but they don't live here. But they stay here about 3 or 4 months out of the year. Well, they don't rent their house, but they could rent their house. And we know, nearly all of us here, of situations where houses have been rented to, I guess for want of a better word, college kids or whatever. And you'd see, 15 to 20 kids staying in one house. Well, I'd much rather have the situation with 1 or 2 rooms in the back of someone's home, renting that, because I think, and I would suggest that if we do change the LDR, it would be that the resident must be a permanent resident in order to do that.
Well, you also have to look at that like you're talking next to you. I have one next to me. Again, the resident or the owner does not live here. I do know that facility has a separate building. The grandmother, I think it was, purchased it a couple of years ago, even though it had been built at that time, and had been used prior to that for some of the children of the other occupants to sleep in when they were there. And it's become a very nice family compound, and I do know that when all the family gets there, they sleep in it. The rest of the time, it's not rented. I'm not necessarily in favor of putting them there for rentals, but I have really not a problem with family.
Well, I don't know how you could say family and not,
No, I understand,
You know.
it's difficult. I'm just expressing my feelings.
but I would just like to change it so that it's effectively making it allowable to have a building in the back that you could rent, as long as it's not an apartment, which means they can't cook in it. And that person must be a permanent resident of the city. And,
If you're saying they're going to rent it or just have that type of facility.
well, either one.
Well, what are we going to do with the ones that are there now, even if we change it?
We can't burn them, so I guess we'll have to leave them there. I mean, I don't know when these things were built.
Yeah.
But you're right, it hasn't been enforced at all, to my knowledge.
I'm sure that we have a lot more than anybody is aware of. It has never been enforced. So if we look at the LDR, maybe we need to say, as of such and such a date, this is not, we're going to start enforcing it. Those that have already done it, I'm not sure how you're going to run around town and check everybody's backyard structure to see if they have a rental unit or not. Just let them go. We've learned we need to tighten up our LDR and just say, as of this date, whatever it is, something 2018, absolutely not allowed, and we must enforce it. And the realtors must know that nobody can build something or add something in the backyard.
Well, see, I'm for them adding something in the backyard. But we have the density problem you've got to consider too. I mean, if somebody already has a home there, most of the time I've noticed the houses that are built are fairly close to the maximum by the time they have a driveway and everything else. So it may not affect as many people as we think. But I am for totally rewriting that section. And maybe I'm the only one here. I know one or two people don't like the idea. Well, I know one doesn't, especially. But, so I'm asking you all, what do you think about changing the LDR? I mean, we've been requested to change the LDR before.
I'll start from my end. I don't have a real problem because I see so many already in existence. I think trying to come in and say now, okay, we're officially going to enforce it and we're going to put this little paragraph here, is going to be a problem because someone could have owned a piece of property prior to that time and said, wait a minute, you know, you allowed these and there's umpteen out here, and yet now you're not going to allow me, and it's the same verbiage except you put a date on it now. Also, I don't have a real problem with a mother-in-law suite or however you want to look at it that's not detached, as I said previously. I think we need to update that section to what's reality for today.
I don't have a problem looking at changing it. What's your grasp? Just to change that they are allowed, period? That's basically the change.
Well, I hate to own property that I can't do anything with it. If I wanted to add a building out back and put a Murphy bed in it and make a kind of a art studio or something, And then, all of a sudden, I have it available for family members to sleep in. Well, I can't do that. Well, I just don't like, I just think that's government telling me I can't do this, and I don't see it having a negative effect on anybody. What do you think, Rex?
Well, if, I think you have to be careful and write it, if you were to change it, write it so that it covered, you know, the ones the one we're talking about looked at, I wouldn't mind that being next door to me, because I'm one of the people that may get 13 people there, and 7 or 8 cars there, and I'd much rather have 2 people there and 1 car there. So, you know, I'm not opposed to it. I think you would have to look at it and have some guidelines. I know it's why it's there, is so that somebody just doesn't put rooms in metal buildings and rent them out long-term and things like that.
Well, yeah, it'd have to meet all the codes. And maybe you put a limit on how much an individual can rent. Or maybe it's 2 weeks at a time, or I don't know. But the main thing I like also is that allows me to do, but I don't want to rent anything, but I want the space, and I have the space to do it. And I don't see why I shouldn't be allowed to do that.
Well, I think we
That
probably
leaves me,
need to
right?
stay away from
Well, I know what you're going to say.
No, you don't.
Well, I'm
you
trying to
don't.
find out from all of us,
Well,
so we could, okay, go ahead, Mike, you're the mayor.
no, I'm just waiting my turn. Well, I think I need to clarify. I find what I'm hearing somewhat confusing. First of all, we're talking about the section of LDR that deals with accessory apartments. And that it hasn't been enforced is incorrect. The only reason that it hasn't in areas that you say that you know of that it's not enforced is because they circumvented the LDR. So I'm not one to sit here at this table and govern people to say, well, they did it wrong, and there's a few of them, so now we need to change what we're doing. I think they need to change what they did. I don't think government needs to change for the community. I don't think it's a good example to set to say they didn't get a permit to do that. They went and put in an accessory apartment, and now it's okay because there's several of them around town. There's many people that have come to the city hall and requested to put one in, and they were told no. They were required to live by the LDR, 21 years worth, 26 years worth of LDR. Those are the people that I think the government should support. I'm not going to sit here and support somebody that slipped around and put an apartment in. Now, an accessory building, they're allowed. You can have an accessory building for all of the reasons that the LDR says you can have them, and there's a list of those. But if you have an accessory apartment, it's not allowed.
An apartment.
An accessory apartment, a dwelling unit, a place that is set up to be an apartment. I said it last time, I'll say it again. You can't put enough lipstick on a pig to call it a duck. They are what they are. They're apartments. So that you can't cook in them doesn't matter. If you can live in, if they're a living unit, a dwelling unit, an apartment, they're not allowed. And I just have a problem in our neighborhoods and residential zoning categories that we want to have many motels in the back of our yards. I really struggle with trying to think that that's an appropriate for residential dwelling. And it's not how nice they are. That has nothing to do with it. We're going to put transient people, short-term renters in our neighborhoods. I'm not going to support that. I think the LDR is clear why it was put in there. I think it has been enforced. And if it hasn't been, if we have done things and ignored that, I'm not aware. I don't know where, if somebody didn't go get a permit to do it, I don't know. I can't speak to that. I'm personally not aware of this voluminous of accessory apartments that exist. I know of accessory buildings, and I don't know, most likely it could be someone's tool or workshop that's got a day bed in it. There's nothing wrong with that. Maybe they want to take a nap when they're working out there. Maybe their cousin wants to sleep out there. We don't know that. But when we become aware of where an apartment detached from the home, then the city should react to that. I'm not for changing the LDR for those that did it wrong or slipped it in, that all of a sudden now that needs to be the rule. So I'm not going to support that.
Well, I agree that if they've just done it without getting the permits and so forth. But what happens to those that have gotten the permits?
They shouldn't have been approved.
Right,
Well, but it was.
but it was, and others.
How many cases are you aware of that?
Okay, I'm aware of one. But there might be others that were approved and now hear that they can't rent it. I don't know if others were already approved or not. I don't know. They'd have to go back and look at their paperwork with the city. But we know of one that did all the permit.
Did you read what was written on there?
Yes.
A guest house and a pool house. Is that upfront and open and honest about what's there? A guest house and a pool
The
house.
guest house, absolutely.
So the pool house that's what it says on the
Well, there's
document.
there's a pool there in that particular case, so, you know,
I'm just saying,
I'm not particularly in favor of the buildings that are separate that are rentals. That can happen. I'm not sure with some of the things I've seen, we can do a whole lot about it. But I'm more interested in the changes where it affects these type buildings for families when they come down. We've always had, I think, from what I've been seeing, have seen family compounds at different places in our city, where on weekends through the summer, through the winter, grandma, the kids, the grandkids all come in, and there's, in several cases, I still say, several buildings that the children and sometimes grandchildren sleep in so the family can have fun. Rentals, I'm not that I don't want to get into the rental business on this personally, but I don't have a problem with the separate buildings that are there.
I don't really care about the history. I've never liked this part of the LDR ever since I've lived here, and even before I lived here, because as I've mentioned before, I spent the money with an architect to draw up some plans to put on one of the lots that I owned here, and then found out at the last minute that I couldn't do that. Of course, you could say that was my fault because I didn't do my studying of the LDR, which is this thing, and that's probably true. But I just think if I own the property and I paid for the property and I paid taxes on the property, that I should have a little more leeway in what I want to do with my property than the LDR allows me to do.
Ms. Ryder, you raise your hand up, come on.
Yes. I don't know how come or how we've lowered ourselves to what we are now discussing. I live in Section D, which is a single-family dwelling area. Having an accessory building is not the same thing as having a rental piece of property. Single family. That does not mean I'm going to put 2 accessory buildings in the back of my yard and rent them out. We have lots of sections in this town that is commercial, that is tourist residential. We have so much rental property here already. Please, we have one section back there. We don't bother anybody. We're quiet. I do not want my neighbor to have 2 buildings, 1 building, and be renting it out and having a flow of tourists or whatever. Renting is not the same as having your family here. You want to put an accessory building out there? You want your family to come and live be there and have fun and everything? That's perfectly fine. I'm against you allowing these buildings to be rented out.
So then the LDR does need to be changed because it doesn't discuss renting at all.
It does
Well-
what?
It doesn't discuss rental at all. It says accessory apartment. It doesn't say rental property. It says accessory apartment.
But in her neighborhood, an owner can rent the house.
That's correct.
Yep.
That is correct. You can rent your house in
Anywhere, but,
Anyway.
Town in the United States, you can rent a house.
and you can rent it to 25 people or 2 people. But
Absolutely. But I cannot put accessory buildings, so then I have lots of people.
Doesn't the LDR, maybe I'm incorrect, if you have a separate building, an accessory building, that's set up that someone, in essence, could sleep in and live in, which is kind of a dwelling unit, doesn't it prohibit that? Because that then goes back to something similar to a mother-in-law suite that would have to be attached as written. Doesn't it really prohibit us as an accessory building to have an ability to sleep and stay and so forth as it's written now?
Maybe my copy of the LDR is out of date like my other thing I had. I read in there that you can have someone else renting if you are under the same roof.
Connie, I'm not asking about renting. I don't particularly care for renting.
But,
either.
well, I'm
My
just
question
saying,
on
you
the
can do
LDR
that.
Oh, yeah.
But you cannot have another building separate where somebody stays there, even if it's attached by a breezeway.
My comment is, I think the way it's written, and I may have misunderstood it, is that I couldn't have an accessory building and basically have people staying in it for whatever reason, period. So, in other words, if I read it right, regardless of, away from renting, because I didn't see anything in renting on that section, as far as that section, I cannot have a separate building away from my house, not attached, and have my children and grandchildren stay a week out there and sleep and play and everything, basically as a living space for them.
yeah, it cannot exist.
Yes, it's
Yeah.
the existence that's a
And
violation, not
this
the
is,
rental.
this is where I'm coming
Well,
from,
me
is
too,
that we
yeah.
have these rentals. I'm really in agreement. I'm not sure we can do anything, but I don't want to promote them as a separate unit in the backyard. But I have really no problems with we are a family town. Have been for longer than I've been here, and having a separate auxiliary building out back where my children can come in, or grandchildren can come in and spend a week and have a place that I don't have to put up with them in the house, is probably not a bad deal.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Lisa Wilkerson. Bill came by our house Sunday. Our situation is, and I'm sorry, I'm a little upset. We purchased a property. We were completely misled in the purchasing. And yes, I'm kind of like you. I should have read. I didn't even know about the LDR. No one spoke to us. We have an accessory house. Even in the listing, it says it has a kitchen. All we did, we went in, and now I have spent $10,000 probably putting in beds and buying mattresses, and I'm fine not renting it. But I purchased this property for our family to move down here because my father is disabled, and we intended to put him in that home so we could help care for him. And now that we're done, now I'm hearing that we can't have a kitchen or anything, and I'll be up front. We had it on for rental till we get here. But we are moving here. I already have a job here. It could be as early as next week where we're on a week on, week off. It may not be rented at all, and I'm fine with that. But I don't want to have to retrofit and lose money. The guy, I mean, quite frankly, we're at the point of suing the previous owner for him not disclosing, and he didn't disclose it to you, but it was wired. It's got everything. I didn't do it. And now my property is, in essence, of no value to us. So I just wanted you to see another aspect of it. And we even have another family member who has bought a mile and a half down the road just so we could have the family here. So that's just my take on it.
Well, yeah, the way the LDR reads now, you can't, I mean, it's not supposed to be there. I mean, no matter if you're renting it or for your father-in-law, for anybody, if it exists, it's not correct. It's not right. And that's what I'm opposed to. You know, I think you should be allowed to use that. Now, maybe it's opening up a can of worms for other people that wanted to would take that space and rent it year-round to someone, which I'm not in favor of doing that. But it's nearly the same thing if you're allowing your father-in-law to live there. But that's family. And I just don't like the city telling us that you cannot let your family live out there, and it becomes an apartment because they can cook out there. I mean, in all sense of the word, it's an apartment. And the way it is right now, we've got to define apartment versus room or whatever, which I think we're a little flaky on that. But even if you had to take your kitchen out of it to make it worthwhile, to make it meet the LDR, which I don't know. I'm confused, diffused, and all other ways. I just don't like the idea of government telling us we can't do, in reason, what we want to do on their property. So,
Well, when I spoke before and I said I knew of one, I had spoken to you, and they, from what I'm understanding, when they bought this, the accessory building, in the back it was all plumbed for utilities. They just weren't there, or appliances, they just weren't there. And so they put them in. So now they're stuck. So when I said I knew of one, well, then I know of two, but I didn't want to share. I think we need to include family. I mean, people are going to be so nervous about putting their kids back there or their grandkids back there.
I think there are two issues actually that have come up here. One, rental of an accessory building, and the fact that one is the fact that it can be used if we do allow it for family, non-rental purposes. Rental, I'm not really for. That I think may have to be a state issue, but family, yeah, I have no problem with family.
Let me fast forward 6 months, and we change the LDR, and we say family can use an outside apartment. What are we gonna do? We're gonna just become a police station? What are we gonna
Well,
do?
that's the reason you're asking that, yet that's the reason we're where we are is because we haven't
I
had
disagree,
someone
Mr. Block. We're
full-time.
only where we are because of one person that has 2 rental
No.
units in their backyard.
No.
And contested. That's why we're
We
here.
are where we are because at least 10 I can take you and show
Well,
you
then they
if you want.
should have been reported as, then if that's the case,
You know,
then we failed
One
to
of
do
them
our
I know
job.
has come up in front of us a couple of times, but yeah, reporting, that's the police station again. Al, we're here. What should have been done, what could have been done, that's back there. We're here now. We're here. We are not 10 years ago when this was put in place. Changes in times, changes in people, changes in cities, changes in desires, changes in needs
Tell
called
that to
changes.
those people that were told no, that they couldn't do it. You tell them.
Well,
That's
it
what
hadn't
you
been
need to
done
do
before
then.
that. It's just
You
like,
need to go and tell the people that came and laid their plans out and said, I want to build this accessory apartment for my mother-in-law, and they were scratched off the
and no one
sheet.
had
Okay.
asked to change it,
But,
sir.
and
You're
I'm
wrong,
one of them.
sir.
Before,
You're very wrong.
we wanted to put a garage with an apartment above in the back. We were told no. Okay, fine. Am I upset if we change it? Absolutely not. Because times change and things are different. And
Yeah, Bill, you don't have to come explain that to me, because the planning and zoning fellow did, he's not here now, but he did an excellent job of explaining the LDR to me after the fact. But that's one reason I started questioning, just because it's an LDR doesn't mean that it can't be changed. I think we're gonna find that out in another subject we're gonna be talking about before too long. So the LDR can be changed. And before this was here, 27 years ago, we didn't have it. So we started. Well, anything you start, you can stop.
Or
All right, so
ordinances.
let's try to bring to some closure for this discussion, unless we want to keep, I think, I'm going to say what I said at the last meeting on 2 occasions. I'll open the floor for a motion.
Make a motion that we look at altering or changing the LDR to allow accessory buildings for family to utilize if they're there, non-rental. I think it has to meet all zoning and all of our regulations for buildings, but I have no.
A motion
put this
now.
in. Okay, a motion to allow mother-in-law suites or similar suites to be built on our property that are not attached. Because I think currently it says attached, and just a simple motion that allows them to be unattached.
And can you request the,
Just a moment, just a
Okay.
moment. We have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
second,
can I make a comment?
Well,
We have a
we have a motion, so it's, we can basically do anything. But you need to recognize the motion as it's stated. You didn't make it, so you don't need to correct it. So,
Okay, again, the motion is that we change the LDR to allow, in the language, and I'm not sure what it is, the equivalent to the mother-in-law suite, that accessory type building, to be allowed to be built that is not attached. In other words, remove the need for it to be attached to the residence.
do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion.
Now I can discuss.
Discussion.
Okay. I was just suggesting that when we work on this changing the LDR, they would necessarily have the help of the city attorney if we're running into any problems with that, such as definitions, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, and also probably because I'm not particularly in favor of rental and so forth, strictly on a family basis.
I'm sure you'll get his help. You see his bills, he won't have a problem helping you, I can tell you.
It's true.
So, okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Any discussion from the floor? Call the roll.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Ms. Albrecht?
Yes.
Mayor Kathy?
No.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Mr. Putnam?
Yeah.
All right. So that can be an agenda item or suggested, I don't know how y'all want to deal with that. Suggest,
May I ask a question? Wouldn't this be something that would turn over to planning and zoning at this point?
I don't know.
I don't
know
either.
what's-
I'm asking.
That's the proper protocol, is to start with them to get their opinion of what to change, and we can confer with the city attorney to see what he feels appropriate.
Yeah, I'm just asking.
Okay, so that'll be passed to the P and Z board? Is there someone there that will be able to give them some information about, summarize what we've said here?
We'll give it our best shot.
That means we may have to go out of town to buy paint. But
Okay. Yes, yeah, yes, ma'am, please.
On this accessory building that you're going to let them build, I'm assuming that we're going to take in all the conditions of our building codes and things, one of them being the pervious amount of soil.
Absolutely.
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
yes.
And that's going to limit a lot of people's ability to do this.
Yeah.
Got another question?
Yes. Sure.
Lisa Logan, 402 Maryland. when you do this, are you going to talk to the realtors about when they list things? There's currently one on Canal Parkway that's been listed for, nearly a year, with a price tag of $750,000 that expressly says separate studio apartment. So would you please have some sort of meeting or discussion with the realtors, because this is not by any means the first time this has come up, and they advertise these separate houses as apartments that can be rented out. So you have to include that in your future work.
Yeah, I think that one's been there several years.
It has, but at the
it's
same
still-
time, it's being
still-
advertised as
No, I agree.
a separate apartment.
Like the lady that just talked, you know, I mean, they should be able to tell them what the situation is right now,
Yes.
about what the LDR.
So the council needs to talk to the realtors.
No, I don't disagree with that.
All right, number 2 is special events. City Administrator.
At this time, we don't have a clear policy on special events and who pays what, when, where, and how. In order to establish a policy, we have to get some understanding of what the city council and the public wants to see happen. So I prepared the memo. Let me bring it up so it's on the screen. Items to consider so that we can proceed with that policy. Number 1, as we look to the events, we have some events on public property, we have other events on private property. So what differences shall we make in that? In other words, is there a difference, first of all? Because either one of the two does have some bearing on the city police department when they do traffic control. It has a bearing on our sanitation department when they have trash to pick up and make arrangements to pick up out of the regular normal working hours. So any thoughts on public versus private, or does it really matter?
I don't think it matters. I think it would probably, to me, common sense would say depend on the number of people.
All right. When it comes to an event, insurance requirements. Whether we have an event on public or private property, the city has not required a certificate of insurance that lists us as an additional insured. Without that certificate, we are putting ourselves out there for potential liability. So the question is, should we require that in the future?
If it involves liability, yes.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of liability, more especially depending on the location. Anything, for instance, that's right up against a major road with a lot of traffic, it has more potential for issues to happen. If we're serving alcohol, indeed, that can, contribute. I think it depends on what's going on. If we're having alcohol, if it's in a zone that's going to cause or has potential of causing issues, then yeah, if it happens to be in a neighborhood and it's a few people, it's kind of, private property, it's kind of up to the owner then, I think. But the type of event, what's happening, I think can, to me, make that statement.
In other words, the people holding the event should bear the liability, not the city.
Yeah. And maybe if nothing else, we put something in the clause when they do it and say, hey, if you have a problem, you're liable.
Right.
Now, excuse me, before you
Yeah.
continue, could you give me some examples of events that we hold here that this all applies to? Or give me some examples of what you think or this table thinks are events that are, we're talking about the tree lighting ceremony? Is that an event? It's not city sponsored? Is that an example of an event?
It's city shared. Tree lighting is city shared.
But I'm asking, I'm trying to get a feel for what events, we have the Gumbo Festival, is that is that the list of things that we would think would be appropriate for the Gumbo Festival?
Yes, sir.
Who sponsors the Gumbo Festival?
Special Events Committee. It's a fundraiser for the 4th of July fireworks.
That goes back to number 5 on the list, city-sponsored events versus non-city events. Well, the question was asked recently about whether the city's insurance would cover a city-sponsored event. The answer is yes, it would, only if the group that is putting on the event is responsible to the city. In other words, does anybody on that committee report to any one of the city council members or to the city administrator? And at this point, no one does. So then the special events committee would not be able to have insurance under city insurance covered.
Just a moment, just, I'm trying to wrap my arms around this thing. Is the table, is this an item that needs to be discussed?
This
Only
was
on-
just,
Okay, I think in general, just maybe looking at, doesn't need necessarily be put in place.
Well, here's what happened. I had a request by letter from from the chairman of the Special Events Committee,
Okay.
a concerning letter to me asking that it had come through the grapevine that the city was gonna start charging when they have events for maybe trash or police or whatever. And I just sort of said, whoa, I don't know anything about this. So I asked Mel about it. And he said it had been on his list because he had been tasked with that from months ago, but he just hadn't had a chance to get to it. And I said, well, do you consider it still on your list? He said, yes. I said, well, then let's make it an agenda item to see how involved we want to get. Are we seriously thinking of charging the Special Events Committee for police? And so I don't know what other events there are. I know of a fishing tournament, and I know they contribute to the fire department because they ask them to come down there and they make a contribution. But I don't know of any other events that we hold.
You know, yeah.
Well, but they pay.
As far as the ones you've talked to, I know in the past, like fireworks, for instance, there was, I don't think there has been for several years now, but an item in the budget for, fireworks.
You talking about our donation?
Yeah, or no, I don't think we've had donated, but we've had one in the budget for that. My only suggestion would be, I'm not in favor of it necessarily for these. I would be in favor of recognizing the things like you're talking about and putting in, instead of a donation to them, turning that donation back to, in essence, the city. So we can sponsor them by providing services. But yeah, I'm not in big favor. Now, if we have something new coming in that we haven't heard about, I don't have a problem in kind of looking at this and putting some things together in case Bill McLaughlin wants to put on a film festival or something, I know, I'm using me as an example.
Well,
Sorry.
I know, I'm trying to figure out, is this an item that we need to, I read some of the things we were sent from Pensacola and Panama City Beach, and they're massive.
Gargantuan.
I just don't, I don't have personally a need to get involved in trying to figure out all this.
Does the chief put this in his budget? Extra dollars allowed for special events?
It is budgeted for the reserve, but oftentimes in past, with the previous administration, it does get challenging towards the end of the year that the reserve money does run out.
Is it a item it's in your budget, but is it an item that's easily set? In other words, do you have money, say, special events? And my question is then, if it's not, should it be so we know it's there?
Yes, it should be there for the events, for the officers. Obviously, we'll still come out for whatever the event is. Public safety is first and foremost. But oftentimes, if you put the man hours into the budget, the man hours well exceeds what the budget was set aside for. So it does need to be added, and it does need to be added for different events, whatever the council chooses what the event is. As far as the triathlon, Olga, the one that coordinates that, as in years past, she has offered, but to my knowledge, I don't think she's physically paid as of yet. Has she ever sent a check?
That's normally your
Right.
purview.
Yeah, she has not sent anything to us because for the past year, or even 2 years, we've asked exactly what the monetary amount per hour should be. As there was never a monetary amount ever given, nobody's ever been charged.
Well, go ahead.
I just was gonna ask Mel, do we know of anything coming up that's outside what we normally have been doing?
As a matter of fact, there is a new music festival that's to come the first weekend in November, and it is going to be on the beach at the El Governor in Sunset Park. And that's a little bit out of the box that we're not used to having at all.
Well, I think anything that special events
I see.
does. I'm sorry.
No, I was acknowledging in the back.
Okay.
You go right in.
That they give back to the city, and yes, it's not a city program, but in essence it is. I do not think, I'm not in favor of them being charged for anything because they do give back to the city. On the other hand, the triathlons, all the fishing tournaments, I think they need to be charged. For police, whatever else we think we need, and I think we need to come up with a definite amount per hour. This will be done as of such and such a date, you will be charged. But special events, I'm okay with not charging because they are an arm of the city.
But the taxpayers pay for that.
True.
So I'm not opposed to that. I think the city should sponsor things. I like the idea of having events here because that increases business for the people doing business. It's good for the residents. Some of the residents probably don't want to go to that. Probably a lot of the residents wouldn't want to pay for any part of that. But that's always the case you run into, no matter what you try to do. But I think we need to have city-sponsored things, and maybe we need to be more define what needs to be paid, not out of the city coffers, but for people that are handling the event, like we're just talking about the marathon or whatever. That doesn't affect a whole lot of people individually, but we have a lot of people that come to town, eat in the restaurants, stay in the hotels, motels, and accessory apartments, maybe, but that come into play. So, I think we just need to define what we're going to charge for and what we're not going to charge for, and the things that the CDC puts on, they help us with other things, and I feel like we should help them with that. But it's just kind of floating out there right now as to what we do and what we don't do.
Jerry, commercial events? In other words,
The fishing tournaments
well,
and so forth?
I get, that's fishing, I'm thinking more of the commercial. You have some promoter, I guess, he's talking about that would be in for these. If we define those style of events to have something like this, I'm not, fishing, even the fishing events, I think should make a donation to certainly our police department, but that's not even that, most of them I don't think are that large that they create an issue anyway. And they bring people in here. I may be wrong, I'm not a
Well, some of them
fisherman,
bring
so
a
I
lot of
don't,
people.
do they? I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not a fisherman.
Well, the only one, the MBARA doesn't hold their,
Yeah.
they're here, they move.
Okay, yeah.
But do we hold any fishing tournaments that are 501c3? I think they're all
Only fishing tournament I know is the Gollywop.
That's a 501.
Yeah.
And
Same as
I
special
know
events.
that they donate $250 to the fire department.
Yeah, because we are also a 501c, which is separate from the city.
That's the reason I was saying if we looked at it as a,
They've never had the police down there.
Non-
The fire department is set down there, but I don't think the police.
You know, the other ones
None
we're
of that,
talking
no
about,
meeting.
are the ones that'd be worried about are these that are the non-501 types that are here, they're, you know, promoters coming in, and we're going to have something out of the way. Otherwise, I'm happy kind of where we are.
Well, I agree with both of you that when I read this, I thought, what's this for? On the other hand, when Mel says they're looking for a big music fest in November, are we prepared? Do we know what we would charge for this? And from what you had said, they're expecting a great turnout. So maybe we need to look at these items, as Mel suggested, just to have it ready in case. So then, when they send in their application in October, we're not scrambling around saying, okay, now how much for this, how much for this, do we charge them for this, do we charge them for that? Do they have to have their own insurance? So if we already have this laid out and put it on the shelf, then we know that this is
I was
what they
trying
have
to
to do.
clarify,
Yeah.
I didn't want us, I was thinking when I read that and when I first talked to Mel about it, that it would include all events. I wasn't here when he was tasked to do this, so, and I was thinking, good gracious, surely we don't want to charge, which is obviously from the discussion here that that's not our intent, is to charge the special events committee. Well, that wasn't clarified to me.
Well, this is the first time I've seen it too, to be honest.
Yeah.
Oh.
And another
Okay.
thing on the liquor liability, if it's a city event, they can't have liquor because the city does not have liquor liability.
Do we get liquor liability?
You're out? Okay, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
No, I was,
That's all right.
come on up.
Lisa Logan, just to give you a rule of thumb on this, from my experience, I spent the better part of 20 years in my past life before I moved here, working both as a volunteer and as a paid staff member for any number of events in Memphis. They ranged from tiny nonprofits that had just little bitty events to the Memphis in May International Festival, which is a huge event, to events promoted by the University of Memphis. So I have some experience in this, and you definitely do need, at minimum, this list if you're going to bring in outside events. Whether or not you choose to do this for special events, that's entirely a different matter, I think, because that's been going on so long here. But you will definitely need that if you do anything other than what we've done in the past. And it is a standard operating procedure for all these types of events to build those costs into their own budgets so that they pay for police, they pay for city cleanup, they pay for emergency medical services to be at the events. All of that is standard budgeted items for events that come along. So to put that type of burden on anything other than what we've already got in town, to put that burden on the taxpayers to pay for the police, fire, ESU, and cleanup is not appropriate, I don't think. So if we are indeed bringing a music festival or anything else that we haven't had before, you definitely need to have this list. You need to have all of your liability and your insurance, and you need to charge them. And that is simply standard operating procedure for these events. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not against the list, I was trying to get a clarification of that. I mean, there's some people in town that I would want people that work diligently to support our city to be thought of that, hey, you know, we're gonna need the policeman down there for 2 hours during music in the park and we're gonna get billed for it. I wouldn't want that, so I didn't have any clarification. But yes, if we're gonna become an event, well, I've never thought of us as that, an event location,
Even at
destination. But
Yeah.
if we do have a request, then absolutely, because I agree totally with Lisa, that that is standard operating. People that put on events for profit, That's part of their built-in expense.
And I'd actually, if we're going to do that, would like for them to go ahead and look at not to have the special events called the small events that we have, but have information available. For instance, if we know we're going to have something in here that's going to have, say, 1,000 people, small, even special events, it's, if he knows how many from looking at others, portable toilets that are normally required for events, doesn't mean we have to require them, but as we work with the people to set it up, we can give them our,
Can I
what we
suggest
think,
that
but
we
that's all.
task the administrator with coming back with something that's reasonable for Mexico Beach?
Sounds good to me.
I mean, there's plenty, I mean, what he sent out from all those other cities, we should be able to pare that down to something that's appropriate for us.
You don't want a 32-page application for them?
I don't want someone that's gonna get married on the beach and gonna have a wedding party of 20 to be scared away because they get a 100-page application.
Gotta have 3 portable
My
toilets.
point being, I think it's obvious what is appropriate for us. And once you pare down to things that you think that we need to look at, then I'm fine with that. But I don't think we need to sit here and go through those items and tell you yes or no. Just bring us back something that says, after doing some research, I pared this down, here's what I think, then give us that.
Sure.
Fair enough?
So we have a special events committee?
Sure.
Yes.
Okay.
We do not, they have a 501c3 special events committee.
We don't, the city doesn't, Jerry, but the
Don't they?
Special Events Committee is an
Special events-
independent
okay.
organization.
But they must represent the city in some respect.
We have one
Planning
person.
things.
Linda, I think, aren't you on that?
We don't?
I'm on it, but
Yeah.
I don't represent the city, I'm just a member of it.
Oh, I
But the
thought you were on the
CDC
I'm on
is
C-
not the Special Events Committee.
No, CDC is not special
Okay, I'm
events.
sorry, I thought you were on the
That's okay.
special events committee
That's all
also.
right. I am on special events.
Okay, but not as a
representative
council
of the
So,
person.
city, no.
so Mel is the person that handles all of this. Anytime there's a planned event, he has to kind of make sure it's organized and whatever. I mean, that's the only person then, right?
Well, at this point in time, we have a special events permit that is given to our office, and we just double check to make sure we have the contact information of the organizer, things of that sort. And it works really well, except some events don't even contact our office.
Well, I think everybody that's having an event in Mexico Beach needs to contact.
Exactly. And it's not because, and it's not that we want to control them, it's we just need to know about them. For instance, we never hear from the Ling Ding people, the Golly Whopper, we don't even know when they're having it or what.
Well, then we need to fine them. If wait a minute, let me start this. If they know that they're supposed to contact you, I'm sure that they all
Well,
know.
they probably don't know they're supposed to.
Okay, well, maybe we need to send a letter.
Right, they never have, so why should they? It all works
Okay,
fine.
all right, so maybe we need to send a letter. And if they don't, and they have this, then maybe we need to fine them. I'm not saying $500-600, but we need to fine them just to make a point that we've asked you to contact us, let us know you haven't.
And they
Maybe
need to
this will be remembered.
We could do that with accessory apartment.
And they need to let you know well in advance. We need to have.
Yes, ma'am. Somebody else needs to talk besides us. Come on. Did we ruffle your feathers?
No, I just have a question.
I just wanted to be how far to get away from it.
No, we're good. And on behalf of CDC, because I've even clarified to Mel, CDC does not want to take advantage of any of the city's resources or funding, and so if we need to pay our part when we have our CDC events, we are happy to comply with that. But in regards to the permitting and the events and everything, let's take Golly Whopper, because Golly Whopper is held at the Mexico Beach Welcome Center. Do they need to take a permit and notify the city because they're, quote, on city property? Or does special events need to contact the city for art and wine when it's on private property at the Driftwood? those are the events like the public versus private. Who needs to contact the city to pull these permits? Like what you were talking about, Linda, with, you know, they need to contact the city. NBARA holds their Kingfish weigh-in on private property at the Mexico Beach Marina. Now, granted, they do use city sources as far as sanitation and police to help with trafficking and everything, but the event itself is held on private property. I don't even think they pull a special events permit.
They do not.
Okay,
Even a wedding on the beach pulls a permit.
yeah.
Personally, I think that, I don't know.
I'm
what you-
splitting hairs, Lee.
Yeah, but I think everyone, if they're gonna have special events, because it's, you know, whatever type, wherever, if it's going to involve us having to clean up, police or anything, at least needs to get a permit so that we're notified something's gonna happen. That's my person.
I would agree. If they're gonna use our police, if they want extra police there or extra sanitation, then I think it needs to go through the city so that they're aware. And so it's just not on Philip and the chief knowing.
On the special events permit, it does ask if police is needed. It doesn't ask about special sanitation, which maybe that should be put on there.
We're gonna get a little draft coming back to us, and we'll all know what's going
I'm
on.
happy to tell you all the events that go on in Mexico Beach if you need a list of them that I know of. The Jazz Festival is not CDC event, please know that. It's outside of our scope.
All right, thank you. All right, so we're gonna get us something back that pares down, gives us, if nothing else, it's an outline of suggestions for things not going down. I think some of these are not appropriate, but some of them are. Fair enough? Is that good with everybody?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Okay. Moving on. Police chief, you're up.
Yesterday, we had a situation with the fire department. I want to give recognition to Chief Simmons, Adrian, Nathan Yerbuzo, and Sergeant McSweeney responded to a residence where a gentleman was in full cardiac arrest. The 4 persons I just named revived the individual using first aid techniques through their training, along with an AED. Unfortunately, I found out this morning that the person did succumb and moved on to a greater place, but I just wanted to recognize the 4 people for crediting what they did. They are definitely an asset to the city, the fire department and all the persons that responded out to that. So I just wanted to recognize that. Also for public safety, I received a couple of calls from citizens in town that persons unknown, often with a foreign accent, are calling that they're representatives of Gulf Power, insisting people that their utilities are going to be shut off. I had a call a couple days ago from a business in town that Gulf Power have been in contact with them. They will not call you and threaten. People that are calling up are saying that they're representatives of Gulf Power, and then they will direct a person to go down to a certain express lane and pick up a particular debit card. It's called a green dot card, and put X amount of money on there and then call these people back. We had an officer pretend to be a business the other day, and we did call them back. And unfortunately, last year we had a couple citizens in this town that did donate money to this illegal operation. So as a public safety, if somebody calls representing that they're from Gulf Power, I would probably say that that is a scam, because we got a bill and that there's numbers that you can contact and speak directly to the company. But I'm asking for the public right now not to be taken by the people that are doing this.
Chief, is it Gulf Power?
Duke
and/or
Energy.
Duke Energy?
No, ma'am, it's just Duke. Just Duke Energy provides service to Mexico Beach.
Duke Energy.
Yes, ma'am.
However, we did have a call this morning from Gulf Power. So there are people that are calling up do not know exactly what is local. That's why it's giving us the information that's out of state. When we tracked the number, it went through like Oklahoma, Texas, so it's bouncing off of different areas. So the person that you're speaking to, one guy had a Middle Eastern accent we spoke to, another guy had like a Pakistani accent. So I'm just asking for the citizens to be careful and stuff like that. Obviously, Duke is our local, but again, they're calling from different people. One of the express lanes last year on 98 was called from Mississippi Power. Obviously, whoever the calling is, so obviously it is a scam. We also responded to a call, a man with a gun, last week. We made 2 arrests. In the course of the arrests, we recovered multiple weapons, marijuana, methamphetamines, grams of suspected heroin. So the subjects were arrested for that. There's also a report that there were children involved in the incident. They were not there. I've been in contact with the state attorney's office in Gulf Power. The kids are fine. And we have also got an emergency injunction that this individual doesn't get his kids back. And the vehicles that were here in Mexico Beach have also been removed at the owner's expense, so they're no longer in the city at all. We had a couple vehicles broken down. One, unfortunately, while we were transporting a prisoner to jail, he broke down on the side of the road. So our cars, again, are in disrepair. They were repaired as quickly as the city could get to it, so I do appreciate that. Traffic on 98 is continued to be monitored. We've had very little citations, so credit to Mr. Wallace. The car out there has been an advantage. Not a dummy car, it was an actual real person. And field training is continuing. We've had a couple officers just came back from the FBI training. And we have DUI training right now for 3 officers. But other than that, that's all I have. Thank you.
Question for the chief? I saved my comments from the beginning to now. I had a business owner come see me. It was in relationship to the gun that was apprehended at the campground.
Yes, sir.
And I just want you to know, not only you, but all of us and our citizens, she spoke extremely, she was very impressed with how our police department handled that. I guess it's obvious, even though I always think we're immune sometimes to things in Mexico Beach that you see on TV or you read about in the paper. These guys don't always know what they're walking into, and I think that was one of the situations that you found yourself in that day.
Yes, sir.
She was grateful. She came to me very sincerely to make sure that as a public official, how much she appreciated the way our police department handled that. I want to pass that on to you and to the officers.
Yes, sir.
I think it's, as she said, we may act small town, but those guys knew what they were doing and they were prepared to handle it. Whatever would have come your way, thank goodness that nothing did. But that was a situation that could have been it could have escalated what you were dealing with. So, thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I'll pass it on.
Okay, please do. Chief Simmons.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Just so you know, I was incorrect on when the mailing was going out for the fire assessment notices. They're going out today. I thought they were going out earlier, but we paid a company to do it, so it's out of my control. Those are the rates we talked about, which is $356 for a single residence. It's 50 cents a square foot for commercial and $54 for vacant land. And they should receive those this week. Almost everyone should have theirs this week, hopefully.
Are we talking about 100%?
Yeah, we mailed it at 100%. We can come down from there if we choose to. But in the future, if we continue with this fire assessment, it would be at 100%. So this would be a realistic rate if we decide to put it on the tax bill for next year based on our February 5th and 13th meeting. Other than that, progress continues on the station. We're waiting for a donation from Tranquil Harbor. They have a date of February 3rd. They want to do a check ceremony. And from there, I already have a contractor lined up to get back with the work. That's going through the non-for-profit side of fire department funds, so the city doesn't have to get involved there. It keeps it simple. After that, it should be mostly livable, and we'll just be waiting final fire assessment money to finish the last $60,000 roughly to finish, which is built into the fire assessment, and we'll I think we found a contractor that'll do the work. Other than that, Adrian has some information on a grant we're awarded that you guys voted on to accept, and it's just a final execution, and just keep working on that from there.
Thank you. Question?
Yeah.
Fire Chief?
Am I assuming that we're going to charge 100%? Is what the letter says?
We're gonna show up on the 5th. This room's gonna be full of people, and they're gonna tell us what we're gonna do, I'm tell you.
Well, then we're gonna go to 79%. Don't
Well,
you
that's
get?
why we're having a public hearing.
But the idea was, the direction I gave originally would be the next year we would go to 100% anyway, so that's going to be on our tails as soon as this one is done. You see, it's going to kind of be in rapid succession, because we're going to vote this one, it's going to go through, and then in a few months, we're going to have to re-vote in, but all the groundwork is laid, so that's, you know, that number gives people a good understanding of what they'll pay.
I suggested putting 79% on that letter.
You can say that at the 5th.
I will.
Yes, sir.
That'll help you.
Yeah, I'm running again this year.
All
right. Thank you, sir.
Well, that'll definitely help you then. Go for 50 then instead of 79.
Well, that's an idea.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Clerk?
I'll wait till my report. Go first.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
That's all right. I don't mean to skip you, but sometimes I do. Go right ahead.
I got a few things this go around. One of the things, let's start on the project list. Municipal Park is finished by City Hall. We've had quite a few families out there enjoying that. It was actually great to see them out there. Parker Park is finished. We ran 2 permanent power sources away from the bathroom, so now it's less of a trip hazard when we put our electrical pedestals out there. So it's a little safer, a little better.
Kimberly, you heard that?
Yes,
Okay, I'm checking. That's all.
Yeah, Kimberly, I'm sure CDC is available to help us with that, right?
Special events already paid for all the supplies.
Oh, that's very good.
Remember, you're running. Be careful. Get your back out.
Only cost the city labor. We appreciate it, thank you.
I'm not going to talk anymore.
Until Diane.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen. Sorry, Philip.
No problem, Mayor.
I apologize. We got off course for you.
We, 14th Street Walkover, we have obtained the permit from DEP. We will begin that project as soon as possible, as well as the walking bridge across from, or in front of the Shell Shack. Flu season's kind of kicked us pretty hard this year, but we're doing a good job. The guys are working very hard, getting things done. Tommy's done a great job. Road Department's done an excellent job, Andy and them guys. Really stepping up to the plate and taking over the shortfalls. We had an issue over the weekend with our dredge. The steel pipe that comes out of the side of the dredge ruptured. We've got it, I feel the word patched is probably too strong, but we've got the parts coming to get it fixed. And we'll have that, we got to build a new one, but we'll get that back running very, very soon. The boat ramp, I tried to get this in our packets last week with the hard freezes and the line breaks and all that not good stuff. I wasn't able to get it in there. But we finally got a number for the total cost of the project, which is $49,215, roundabout. I set aside some money for miscellaneous items that we may not be thinking of, but we're looking at a $50,000 price tag. We've got everything set up, ready to go for this project. We actually got some of the stuff already sitting at the shop, but the big items, the walk-in cooler and the pole barn, I just want to make sure that we're all still on the same page and we want to move forward with this project.
Yeah, I think so.
Can't imagine we would.
Did we decide to have a trailer available for that cooler?
It will sit on a trailer.
It will sit on a trailer. How many steps? I guess I was wondering, how high is that trailer? And if you have cans of, trash cans of fish guts, how heavy is that going to be to get up to the trailer?
Well, it's kind of a question that it's going to be about 4 or 5 steps up to the cooler. As far as how heavy it's going to be, that's going to be up to the person cleaning the fish and how much they put in them totes. We're going to get small totes, so hopefully people won't be able to overload them and hurt themselves or anything like that. The ramp leading up to is going to be an aluminum ramp with grading, so that'll help with the anti-slip surface. The overall height
is, like I said, about 5 steps. Yes, sir.
Did I miss something? Did we get electricity to that?
We haven't ran it yet, but we've got everything worked out. We've got wire and everything set at the shop to do it.
But approved. It hasn't been approved by St. Joe?
Everything's approved. We're ready to go.
Oh, it is all approved?
We bypassed
Yep.
it, Joe.
We did?
Yeah. We ran out of patience.
That was a meeting you missed.
I must have slept through that one.
Everything we need to move forward with this project, we have.
Good deal. Move.
A fish cleaning station, is it gonna be there too?
Tables? Yes, sir.
Okay.
We'll have 2 tables, 2 10-foot tables. We'll have water. We'll have lights. We'll have drain. We'll have the whole kit and caboodle out there. It'll be a nice setup.
Please move forward.
Okay.
And that amount of money, if I recall, was right in the range that had been talked about.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Just as a quick update, last week's hard freeze, we had 16 to 20 calls for service due to rough water lines. Was not near as bad as we all feared that it was going to be, so that was great. And the last thing I got, Mayor, Council, if you would just indulge me for 1 second, we have one of our employees retiring this week. So if you see Mr. R.D. Young out and about, his last day is Friday.
Really?
He is retiring.
How long has he been here?
9?
No, he's been here longer than that, 13, 14 years. He's been here longer than I have.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna give him a chicken dinner Friday, and we're gonna have one last dinner together. And
He finally decided it's time to go.
In lieu of a watch.
he really doesn't want to, but you know, I think he's just decided it's time to do something different. And I personally, you know, I worked with RD for 11 years. I'm gonna miss him. He really is. He's a good guy. So,
Super.
but Friday will be his last day. And that's all I got, Mayor, Council.
Okay.
Unless y'all got anything for me.
Canal Pavilion.
Give us just a second. Go ahead. Do what?
We haven't got any updates from DEP as of yet.
Okay.
They are, how do you say, being a stickler?
Have you written President Trump about this?
No, but Ben did build
Come
a
on.
fine wall around the playground.
We need to get.
Philip, this
Yes,
is
ma'am.
just from the newspaper's Facebook page. There were any number of people who said thank you very much for the work you did on the busted water line over the
ma'am.
weekend. They very much appreciated it, and they said thank you for working so hard, especially in the cold weather. So pass
Very
that
well.
on, please.
Yes, ma'am, I will. Thank you.
Yeah, we called a break on that cold weather.
Big time.
That could have been stressed us out.
And it was actually a good thing that a lot of our calls came in from people just simply walking down the road and noticing water. So
I
that
think it
was,
was great how quick you got the snow off the road.
we tried.
Adrian?
I'm going to be a little windier than normal. I'll apologize ahead of time. So, first thing up, the fire department has received a grant in the amount of $28,104.80 for 5 SCBA's. We, of course, are over the $8,000 bid mark, but when we applied for the grant, we piggybacked on an Orange County contract that they went out for bids along with Bay County, and we piggybacked off the 2 of those to waive our bid process to get it done. It's not on your agenda. I thought we could wait, but there is going to be another round, and it sounds like we have a very good shot of getting funded that round as well. So I'm requesting a motion from the council accepting this bid and moving forward to get this done. It's going to cost us nothing. We're just the fiscal agent. It's going to come through, go right out. So that's the first thing I have, and it's for 5 SCBA's, and then we're going to instantly apply for round 2, which should be awarded in about March. So if we can do this before this price changes in March, we should have 10 if they give us the second round.
Okay, did someone understand well enough to make a motion?
Shall make a motion to accept the current bid, piggyback on Orange County and Bay County for the, what are they,
5 SCBA's.
5 estimates.
Second.
Got a motion to second. Any discussion? Any opposition to the motion? Motion carries 5-0.
Perfect. All right, next thing is, we've had a lot of things going on, and everybody's probably wondering why we haven't seen a budget amendment. I'm gonna prepare it all as one. With the fire assessment coming up, if that passes, we're gonna have to amend that entire budget. We've got the boat ramp amendment that needs to be done, the sand bypass is gonna have to be done, this fire grant is gonna have to be done. It's just the amendments to show the money in to follow all the grant funds and the special projects we have going on. So I'm lumping them as one instead of bringing an ordinance every week. So that's where that is at. And as of 10:30, 9 minutes ago, the fiscal year 17 audit is underway. That is my report.
Okay. Did they start, you're saying they started today?
10:30, they were meeting to start.
That was there, that was there, okay. Questions for the clerk? Thank you, sir. Mel?
I'm happy for Mr. Young in his retirement and all, but I'm kind of disturbed a little bit because if you look at the roster of our employees, at this particular time, I'm number 3 on the oldest list. I will now go to number 2. That's hard to take sometimes.
Should we wear some kind of armband?
Yeah, and unfortunately, number 1 is probably going to retire later this year, so, oh my gosh, it's not right. One thing I did fail to put on the agenda, and it's totally my fault. The LDR requires that in January, for some reason, we make our annual appointments to the Plan and Zoning. And of course, in odd number years, we do post 1, 3, and 5, and in even number years, we do post 2 and 4. Because these are rather innocuous and routine in matter, I didn't feel that it would be a problem for us to go ahead and make a motion to, for post number 2, reappoint Jim Bush, and for post number 4, reappoint Bill Driver. Both of them did at the last P&Z meeting say they wanted to continue, so we've already got their permission to proceed. So if you could make a motion for Mr. Bush and Mr. Driver for reappointment.
So move. Have a motion? Second. Any questions, comments, any opposition? Tell them thank you.
Tell them thank you.
And we are proceeding, with the comprehensive plan process. We do have a meeting on the 30th, which will take the place of our first meeting in February, because we have 2 members going to be gone in February, so we moved it up a week. We'll go ahead and review our previous elements to make sure they're where they want it to be. We've got quite a few to go through yet, and of course, we're not keeping the city council in the dark, per se, but we've got to get it to a certain level where it's reviewable. Right now, it's kind of piecemeal here and there, so the plan is to go ahead and proceed with deliverable number 2 by the end of this month. Number 3 isn't due until May, so sometime between maybe March or May, you'll get some sort of a draft to at least look at, because even though the P&Z is the group that gets this together, it's ultimately your responsibility to pass it. So you should have some knowledge about what's going on. So we'll try to get some stuff to you as time goes on. That's all that I have, Your Honor.
Okay.
What is the date that you expect to have that all finished? Is that right?
We're supposed to have it done sometime in June.
Okay.
That's the deadline at this point.
Will we be starting, I think we have to redo the LDR itself. Will that start
Well, that's
this
a whole
year?
separate issue. We got to get the comp plan
Yeah, I
done
know. I'm
first.
saying, would that start this year, or is that slated for next?
It'll probably start later in the year.
Thank you.
Okay, any announcements? Motion for adjournment?
No, you have a
Wait a
hand.
minute. Oh, announcement, come on. Oh, I'm sorry, you got it.
Few issues, Al. We noticed that the dredges has been out working all weekend, and we certainly appreciate the effort. It's noticed and it is appreciated. I do have some items that I'd like to mention to you. Before the construction, we had a drop box where people could drop a check in, and that drop box needs to be reinstalled. I'd like to see if that can be done.
Do we have,
Before the construction, we also had a sign.
excuse me, hang on a minute, do we have that?
Yes.
I think Thomas said we did.
Okay, I mean, we do still have it. And the location to put it?
It was right across the street from the Welcome Center.
We'll put it at the first wall.
Okay.
There was a sign, before the construction, the new construction, there was a sign posted there that said that you needed to contact the harbor master before you could put a boat in a slip. We need to get that sign back again, because I do have people just coming down and putting a boat in a slip, and then I gotta go find out who they are, chase them around. The sign should be double-sided so that you can see it from the road and the water. It had, please contact the harbor master, and had the prices of the slips were on there. It had the Mexico Beach logo on it, and it had the phone numbers. We need to look into that. I'll draw up a sketch if you want, and we can get that replaced. I think that's a necessary thing to do.
Something you can go through?
Okay. The pilings that are supporting our new walkways going out to the boat, there are a 2x12 that extends past the piling. And the boats with the water going up and down with the tides in it are getting caught on those 2x12 that are sticking out. They need to be cut off. And that needs to be done. Boats are bottoming out in the slips right now because of the low water, and boats are actually sitting on the bottom of the canal. I don't know if dredging would help that situation or not, but we need to look into that if we can. I got a report on the fish cleaning station from Philip, and that's great. People have been asking me about that. And we also need to post the slip numbers on the slips so that we can tell people go and slip one, and you'll be able to find out where that is. Basically, that's all I have.
Okay.
All
Is that
right.
something that you have relayed or talked?
We have talked about this time and time again, but it needs to be, I want to address it formally and see that we can get some action on these things.
All right, we'll make sure and submit a list to mail to Philip, and
I will do that. I will draw a sketch of that sign that needs to be posted in there as well. Thank you very much.
Question? Okay. All right. Motion for adjournment.
So moved. Second.
Thank everyone for coming.